The rain drummed against the windows of Myra Santos's cramped studio apartment as she mixed cerulean blue with titanium white on her palette. Her latest painting, a serene lakeside scene, demanded the perfect shade of sky blue, and she had been working on it for 3 straight hours. Paint smudges decorated her old denim shirt, and her curly brown hair was tied back with what appeared to be a clean paintbrush. The sudden buzzing of her phone made her jump, nearly knocking over her jar of turpentine. The caller ID showed Valerie Winters, her childhood friend who had somehow managed to become one of the city's most sought-after fashion models. Mira wiped her paint-covered hands on a rag before answering. "Val, please tell me this isn't about another one of your fashion emergencies," Mira said, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder as she continued painting. "Mira, honey, I need you to save my entire career." Valerie's voice came through in a rush of panic. "Remember that charity gala I mentioned? The one hosted by Damien Cross, that tech mogul who's been on every magazine cover this year?" Mira paused, her brushwork sensing disaster approaching. "The one tonight that you've been planning your outfit for since last month? What about it?" "I just got a call from Milan. There's a last-minute Versace shoot, and they specifically requested me. This could be my breakthrough into international modeling, but the gala starts in 4 hours, and I can't just abandon Mr. Cross without notice." Setting down her brush entirely, Mira sank into her second-hand armchair, where Pepper, her gray tabby cat, was curled up sleeping. "Valerie, please don't tell me you're asking what I think you're asking. You're the only person I trust with this. Just one evening of cocktails and small talk. You'll blend right in, make polite conversation, maybe bid on something small for charity, and then slip away early. Damien Cross probably won't even notice you're not me." Myra looked around her cluttered apartment, taking in the canvases leaning against every wall, the easel positioned to catch the best natural light, and her current painting that represented weeks of careful work. "Val, I'm not exactly charity gala material. I own exactly one dress that isn't covered in paint. I haven't been to anything fancier than the corner coffee shop in months. That's exactly why you're perfect. All those society women are so fake and plastic. You're genuine, Myra. You're interesting and kind and beautiful, even if you don't see it yourself." Despite her reservations, Mira felt herself softening. Valerie had been there for her during the difficult months after college, when her parents had questioned her decision to pursue art instead of a practical career. When Mira couldn't afford groceries, Valerie had shown up with bags of food, claiming she had ordered too much takeout again. "Where is this gala happening?" Myra asked, already knowing she would agree. "The Metropolitan Arts Center. It's a fundraiser for arts education in public schools, which is totally your thing. The whole evening is about supporting young artists." The irony wasn't lost on Mira that she would be pretending to be someone else at an event supporting artists like herself. "What exactly would I need to do? Just show up, look elegant, and be yourself. Damien Cross is hosting, but he'll probably be busy networking with donors and business contacts. You might not even meet him directly." 3 hours later, Mira stood outside the Metropolitan Arts Center, feeling like she had stepped into someone else's life. She wore her only formal dress, a deep emerald green number she had bought for her college graduation. Her naturally curly hair was styled in soft waves, and she had applied makeup carefully. Following a tutorial video she had watched that afternoon, the building before her was all marble columns and gleaming windows, the elegantly dressed people streaming through the entrance. Luxury cars dropped off couples in designer clothing while photographers captured arrivals on the red carpet. Mira clutched her small purse, which contained the invitation Valerie had given her, along with strict instructions to introduce herself as Valerie Winters, if anyone asked. Inside, the main hall had been transformed into an elegant ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over displays of student artwork from various city schools. Servers in crisp white uniforms circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, while soft classical music provided an sophisticated backdrop to the murmur of conversation. Mira accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and began studying the displayed artwork. Pieces were created by children ranging from elementary age to high school seniors. and she found herself genuinely moved by their creativity and expression. A watercolor painting of a family dinner caught her attention, the young artist having captured not just the image, but the warmth and love of the gathering. "It's remarkable how they see the world differently than we do," a deep voice said beside her. Mira turned to find herself face to face with a tall man in an impeccably tailored black suit. His dark hair was styled perfectly, and his steel-gray eyes seemed to take in everything with quiet intensity. She recognized him immediately from magazine covers and business articles as Damien Cross, the 32-year-old tech entrepreneur whose company had revolutionized data analysis software. "They're not afraid to show emotion in their work," Myra replied, finding her voice, despite her surprise at meeting the host so directly. "Adults tend to overthink art, but children just paint what they feel." Damien studied her face with interest. "You sound like you speak from experience. Are you an artist yourself?" Myra hesitated, remembering she was supposed to be Valerie, a fashion model. "I dabble in painting. Nothing professional, just a hobby." "What kind of painting do you enjoy?" Damien asked, moving to stand beside her as they continued viewing the student displays. "Landscapes, mostly. I love capturing the way light changes throughout the day. How the same scene can feel completely different in morning versus evening light." Mira's passion for her art overcame her nervousness as she spoke. "There's something magical about the golden hour just before sunset, when everything seems to glow." Damien found himself genuinely intrigued by this woman's obvious love for art. Most of the people at these events spoke in calculated phrases designed to impress or network. But there was something authentic about her enthusiasm. "Do you have a favorite subject to paint?" "Water scenes, actually. Rivers, oceans. Water is always moving and changing, so no two paintings are ever exactly the same, even if you're painting the same location." Mira realized she was talking more freely than she had intended, but something about Damien's attentive listening encouraged her to continue. They moved through the gallery together, discussing various pieces and sharing observations about the young artist's techniques and perspectives. Mira was surprised to discover that Damien had a genuine appreciation for art and wasn't just making polite conversation. He asked thoughtful questions and offered insights that showed he had actually studied and understood different artistic movements. "I have to admit," Damien said as they paused in front of a vibrant abstract painting created by a teenager, "when my assistant suggested this charity, I thought it would be another routine networking event. I didn't expect to find myself having such an engaging conversation about art." "Most people don't take the time to really look at artwork," Mira said. "They glance at it and move on, but if you actually spend time with a piece, it can tell you so much about the artist's feelings and experiences." As the evening progressed, Myra found herself relaxing despite the formal setting. Damien proved to be an excellent companion, introducing her to other guests, but always returning to continue their conversations. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts and opinions, asking about her views on everything from color theory to the importance of arts education. When dinner was announced, Mira was surprised to find herself seated at Damien's table. Meal was exquisite, featuring multiple courses paired with fine wines. But what impressed her most was how Damien made sure everyone at the table felt included in conversation. He asked thoughtful questions about the other guests' work and interests, showing the kind of leadership skills that had obviously contributed to his business success. During the auction portion of the evening, Mira watched nervously as artworks and experiences were bid on for substantial amounts. When a set of professional art supplies donated by a local art store came up for auction, she was surprised to hear Damien place the winning bid. "For someone who dabbles in painting," he said quietly to her as the auction continued, "you should have quality supplies." Myra looked at him in astonishment. "You can't be serious. Those supplies cost more than I make in a month." "Consider it an investment in supporting local artists," Damien replied with a slight smile. "Besides, I have a feeling your hobby is more serious than you're letting on." As the evening drew to a close, Mira realized with surprise that she had been enjoying herself immensely. What she had expected to be an uncomfortable few hours of pretending to be someone else had instead become one of the most engaging conversations she had experienced in years. Damien was intelligent, thoughtful, and surprisingly down-to-earth, despite his obvious wealth and success. "I should probably be going," Mira said as guests began to leave. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, and for the art supplies. That was incredibly generous." "Would you like to have coffee sometime?" Damien asked, his usual confidence seeming slightly uncertain. "I'd love to continue our conversation about art, maybe see some of your landscape paintings." Mira felt her heart skip a beat. She had almost forgotten that she was there under false pretenses, representing herself as Valerie. The thought of continuing this connection under a lie made her stomach twist with guilt. But she also couldn't bear the thought of never seeing Damien again. "I'd like that," she said softly. As Damien walked her to the entrance where valets were retrieving cars, Mira caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors. For one evening, she had felt like she belonged in this world of elegance and sophistication. Tomorrow, she would return to her paint-splattered apartment and her struggles to make ends meet. But tonight, she had discovered something she hadn't expected to find. "Good night, Valerie," Damien said, and the sound of her friend's name brought Myra crashing back to reality. "Good night," she replied, unable to correct him without explaining the entire deception, as her taxi pulled away from the Metropolitan Arts Center. Mira watched Damien's figure disappear into the night. She had no idea how she was going to handle him. The coffee date she had agreed to, or how she could possibly continue this connection built on a lie. All she knew was that, for the first time in years, she felt like someone had truly seen and appreciated who she was, even if he didn't know her real name. The city lights blurred past the taxi window as Myra headed home, carrying with her the memory of steel-gray eyes and thoughtful conversation, along with a growing realization that her simple favor for a friend had become infinitely more complicated than she had ever imagined. The morning sunlight streamed through Mira's apartment windows as she sat at her easel, staring at a blank canvas instead of painting. 3 days had passed since the charity gala. She couldn't stop thinking about her conversation with Damien Cross. Her phone buzzed with a text message, and her heart jumped when she saw an unknown number. "Good morning, this is Damien Cross. I hope you don't mind that I got your number from the event organizer. Would you be free for coffee this afternoon? There's a quiet place called Riverside Cafe that has wonderful natural light." Mira's hands trembled as she read the message. She had been dreading this moment while simultaneously hoping for it. How could she meet him for coffee when he thought she was Valerie? But how could she not when the memory of their connection felt like the most real thing that had happened to her in years? She typed and deleted several responses before finally settling on, "I'd love to. What time works for you?" 2:00.
"I'm looking forward to seeing your paintings."
Panic shot through Myra.
He wanted to see Valerie's paintings, but Valerie
didn't paint. Mira did. She quickly texted back, "Actually, I left my recent work at my studio. Maybe we could just talk over coffee today." "Of course. See you at 2." Mira spent the next 4 hours pacing her apartment, changing clothes 3 times, and having a crisis of conscience. Pepper watched her from his perch on the windowsill, occasionally meowing as if offering commentary on her internal struggle. "Wait, am I doing, Pepper?" she asked the cat. "I should tell him the truth right away. But what if he never wants to see me again? What if he thinks I'm just some pathetic artist who deceived him?" At exactly 2:00, Mira arrived at Riverside Cafe, a cozy spot with large windows overlooking the park. Damien was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 coffee cups in front of him. He stood when he saw her, and she noticed he looked more relaxed than he had at the formal gala, wearing dark jeans and a simple gray sweater. "You look lovely," he said, pulling out her chair. "I took the liberty of ordering you a latte. I hope that's all right." "Perfect, thank you," Mira said, settling into her seat and trying to calm her racing heart. For the next hour, they talked about everything, except painting. Damien told her about his company's latest project, developing software to help small nonprofits manage their operations more efficiently. Mira found herself sharing stories about her work at the flower shop, describing the regular customers and their unique personalities. "You have an artist's eye for observing people," Damien said, smiling at her description of Mrs. Chen. "An elderly woman who came in every Tuesday to buy a single yellow rose for her late husband's grave." "I think everyone has stories worth telling," Mira replied. Most people just don't take the time to really look and listen. Their conversation was interrupted when a tall, elegant blonde woman approached their table. She wore a designer suit and carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "Damien, darling," the woman said, leaning down to kiss his cheek, despite his obvious discomfort. "I heard you were in town. Need to talk about the Singapore project." Damien's entire demeanor changed, becoming formal and distant. "Rebecca, I'm having coffee with a friend. Can we discuss business later?" Rebecca's sharp blue eyes assessed Mira with undisguised curiosity and a hint of dismissal. "Of course, but don't forget about dinner Thursday. Your mother is expecting. Both of us." After Rebecca left, an uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Mira could sense that whoever this woman was, she represented a complication in Damien's life. "Ex-fiancé," Damien said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. "We were engaged for 2 years, but she was more interested in the merger of our families, businesses, than in building a life together. I ended things 6 months ago, but our companies still work together occasionally." Myra felt a pang of sympathy for him. That must be difficult, having your personal and professional lives so intertwined. "It's one of the challenges of this lifestyle," Damien said, his gray eyes meeting hers. "People often have ulterior motives for wanting to be close to you. It's refreshing to meet someone who seems genuinely interested in conversation rather than what I can provide them." The guilt in Myra's chest intensified. She was deceiving him just as much as anyone else, maybe more so because her deception was about her entire identity. Over the following week, Damien texted her daily. They met for coffee twice more, and each conversation deepened Mira's feelings for him, while simultaneously making her deception more difficult to maintain. He was intelligent, funny, and surprisingly vulnerable when he talked about the pressure of running his company and living up to his family's expectations. On Friday evening, Myra was in her apartment working on a new painting when her doorbell rang. She opened the door to find Tom Hayes, her neighbor from across the hall, holding a plate of homemade cookies. "Thought you might be hungry," Tom said with his characteristic gentle smile. "You've seemed distracted lately, and I haven't heard your usual late-night painting sessions." Tom was a high school teacher who had lived in the building for 3 years. He was kind, reliable, and had harbored obvious feelings for Mira that she had never encouraged, though she cared for him as a friend. "Thanks, Tom. Come in for a minute." Mira accepted the cookies gratefully. She had barely been eating, too anxious about her situation with Damien to have much appetite. Tom looked around her apartment, taking in the new canvases and the obvious signs that she had been working intensively. "New project?" "Something like that," Mira said evasively. She had been painting obsessively as a way to process her conflicted emotions, creating landscapes that seemed to capture her inner turmoil through stormy skies and turbulent waters. "Mira, is everything okay? You seem different lately." Tear. "In some ways, but also worried about something." The concern in Tom's voice nearly broke her resolve to keep her secret. "I've gotten myself into a complicated situation, Tom. I did something that seemed harmless at the time, but now it's become much more serious, and I don't know how to fix it without hurting someone I care about." Tom sat down on her couch, his expression serious. "Does this have to do with why you've been dressing up and leaving the building looking like you're going somewhere important?" Mira realized she had been more transparent than she thought. "It's complicated. Try me." An outside perspective helps. For the next hour, Mira told Tom everything about the charity gala, her growing relationship with Damien, and her inability to tell him the truth about who she really was. Tom listened without judgment, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "You're in love with him," Tom said when she finished. "I don't know if it's love yet, but it's definitely deeper than anything I've felt before," Myra admitted. "He sees me, Tom. When we talk, I feel like the most interesting person in the world, but it's all built on a lie. Have you considered that maybe he's falling for the real you, not the fake identity? Everything you've told me suggests that you've been genuine in your conversations with him, even if he doesn't know your real name. But what happens when he finds out? He'll think I was using him, just like everyone else in his life." Tom was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "What happens if you don't tell him and he finds out another way? That would be worse, wouldn't it?" Before Mira could answer, her phone rang. Damien's name appeared on the screen, and her stomach clenched with anxiety. "Hi," she answered, trying to keep her voice steady. "I hope I'm not calling too late. I have a proposition for you." Damien's voice sounded excited, more animated than she had heard him before. "What kind of proposition?" "My company is hosting a weekend retreat in the mountains for our executive team and key partners. It's partially business, but there will be plenty of time for relaxation and outdoor activities. I'd love for you to join me as my guest." Myra's mind raced. Weekend retreat would mean extended time together, more opportunities for her deception to be discovered, and deeper emotional involvement that would make the eventual truth even more devastating. "That sounds wonderful, but I'm not sure I'd fit in with your business associates," she said carefully. "You'd fit in perfectly. Besides, I'd much rather spend the weekend with someone who can have a real conversation than listen to more networking. Small talk." Tom watched her face as she struggled with the decision. Finally, she said, "When is it?" "Next weekend. We'd leave Friday afternoon and return Sunday evening. There's a beautiful lodge overlooking a lake. I think you'd love the scenery." Mention of a lake made Mira's artistic heart leap. She could imagine the way the morning light would reflect off the water, the way the mountains would frame the composition. But she could also imagine the disaster that would unfold when her true identity was inevitably revealed. "Can I think about it and let you know tomorrow, of course?" "I hope you'll say yes, Valerie." After she hung up, Tom looked at her seriously. "You're going to say yes, aren't you?" "I don't know, maybe this is getting so complicated, Tom. Maybe it's time to uncomplicate it." "Tell him the truth, Mira. If he cares about you the way you think he does, he'll understand." That night, Mira lay awake staring at the ceiling, torn between her growing feelings for Damien and her terror of losing him. She had never expected a simple favor for a friend to become so complicated, but now she was in too deep to easily extract herself without consequences. The next morning brought a text from Valerie. "How did the charity thing go? You never called me back? Did you meet Damien Cross?" Mira stared at the message for a long time before responding. "We need to talk. Can you come over today?" 2 hours later, Valerie sat in Mira's apartment, listening in amazement as Mira explained everything that had happened since the charity gala. "You're kidding me," Valerie said when Mira finished.
"I'll be?"
"Damien Cross asked you on a weekend retreat? Do you have any idea how many women would kill for this opportunity?" "Val, this isn't about opportunity. I genuinely care about him, and I've been lying to him about who I am. What happens when he finds out?" Valerie was quiet for a moment, then said, "Maybe he won't. Maybe you can just keep being Valerie when you're with him. People reinvent themselves all the time. That's not who I am, and it's not fair to him. He deserves honesty. He deserves to be happy, and you make him happy. Does it really matter what name you use?" Mira realized that her friend didn't understand the depth of her feelings or the moral complexity of the situation. This wasn't just about names or surfacely deception. She was falling in love with a man who thought she was someone else entirely. As Valerie left, promising to support whatever decision Mira made, Mira sat at her easel and began painting. This time, instead of a landscape, she painted a portrait of a woman standing at a crossroads, with two paths stretching out before her into uncertain futures. Her phone buzzed with another text from Damien. "Any thoughts about the weekend? Hoping you'll say yes." Mira looked at the painting, at the woman frozen between two choices, and realized that she couldn't stay suspended in indecision forever. Whatever happened next, she needed to move forward, even if it meant risking everything she had begun to hope for. She picked up her phone and typed, "Yes, I'd love to join you." As she hit send, Mira felt a mixture of excitement and terror. The weekend retreat would either be the beginning of something wonderful or the end of the most meaningful connection she had ever experienced. Either way, she knew that the time for hiding behind someone else's identity was running out. And soon, she would have to face the consequences of her deception, whatever they might be. Friday afternoon arrived with crisp autumn air and golden sunlight that reminded Myra of her favorite painting weather. She stood outside her apartment building with a small weekend bag. wearing her best casual clothes and trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. When Damien's sleek black car pulled up, she felt her heart skip as he stepped out to greet her. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, taking her bag and opening the passenger door for her. "As ready as I'll ever be," Mira replied, settling into the leather seat and trying to ignore the voice in her head that kept whispering about the deception she was maintaining. The drive to the mountains took 2 hours, during which they talked about everything from childhood memories to favorite books. Mira found herself relaxing despite her anxiety, drawn into the easy comfort of conversation with Damien. He told her about learning to swim in the lake they were visiting, where his grandfather had taken him every summer until he was 12. "After my father died, those summer trips stopped," Damien said quietly as they wound through mountain roads, bordered by trees and brilliant fall colors. "This'll be the first time I've been back in 20 years. It must feel strange," Myra said, sensing the deeper emotions behind his words, strange and somehow necessary. "I've been thinking lately about the things I've lost focus on while building the company. Family traditions, personal connections, the simple pleasure of watching sunset over water." Mira's artistic heart responded to his words, and she found herself describing how light changed throughout the day, how the same landscape could tell completely different stories depending on the time and season. Damien listened with the focused attention she had come to treasure, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested in her perspective. The mountain lodge exceeded even Mira's imagination. Built of stone and timber, it sat on a bluff, overlooking a pristine lake surrounded by peaks painted in autumn colors. The late afternoon sun turned the water into liquid gold, and Mira couldn't help but gasp at the beauty of it. "It's breathtaking," she whispered, standing on the lodge's wraparound porch and taking in the view. "I hoped you'd love it," Damien said, standing beside her. "When I was a kid, I used to sit right here and watch the sun set behind those mountains. I thought it was the most beautiful place in the world." "You were right," Myra said softly. The other retreat guests were a mix of Damien's business partners and their spouses, all polished professionals who moved through the social gatherings with practiced ease. Mira felt out of place in her simple clothes among the designer outfits and expensive jewelry. But Damien stayed close to her, including her in conversations and making sure she felt comfortable. During dinner, she found herself seated next to Patricia Hoffman, the wife of one of Damien's business partners. Patricia was a warm woman in her 50s who immediately put Myra at ease. "Damien tells me you're an artist," Patricia said over the locally sourced salmon and seasonal vegetables. "What medium do you work in?" "Primarily oils," Mira replied, grateful to be able to speak truthfully about something. "I love landscape. Painting, especially water scenes. How wonderful. I dabble in watercolors myself, though I'm strictly an amateur. There's something so peaceful about painting, isn't there? It's the way it makes you really see the world around you." Their conversation about art continued throughout dinner, with Patricia sharing stories about local artists and galleries she had discovered. Mira found herself genuinely enjoying the woman's company, and for a while she almost forgot about the anxiety gnawing at her conscience. After dinner, most of the guests gathered in the lodge's great room for drinks and conversation around the massive stone fireplace. Mira excused herself and stepped out onto the porch, needing some air and space to think. The lake was now a mirror reflecting the star-filled sky, and she could hear the gentle lapping of water against the shore. "Overwhelmed?" Damien's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him approaching with 2 glasses of wine. "A little. Everyone is so sophisticated and accomplished. I keep feeling like they're going to figure out I don't belong here." "You belong wherever you want to be," Damien said, handing her a glass and leaning against the porch railing beside her. "Besides, Patricia told me she had the most interesting conversation about art she's had in years. She's already planning to visit galleries in the city and wants your recommendations." Mira felt a pang of guilt at the mention of future plans that would be impossible to fulfill under her false identity. "Damien, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" Before she could answer, the porch door opened and Rebecca appeared, looking elegant even in casual weekend clothes. "There you are, Damien. Everyone's asking about the Singapore presentation for tomorrow." "Can it wait until tomorrow?" Damien asked, his tone polite but clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Of course, but your mother called the lodge looking for you," She wants to discuss the foundation board meeting next week. Rebecca's eyes flicked to Mira dismissively. Told her you were entertaining a friend. After Rebecca went back inside, an uncomfortable silence settled between Mira and Damien. She could sense his tension and frustration with his ex-fiancée's continued involvement in his life. "Shh. I'm sorry about that," he said finally. "Rebecca has difficulty accepting boundaries, especially when it comes to family business." "She seems to care about you," Mira said carefully. "She cares about what I represent: security, social status, business connections. I spent 2 years trying to convince myself that was enough for a marriage, but I finally realized I wanted something real." The word real hit Mira like a physical blow. How could she talk about wanting something real when their entire relationship was built on her deception? "What does real mean to you?" she asked quietly. Damien was quiet for a moment, looking out over the water. "Someone who sees me as more than my bank account or business connections. Someone who's interested in my thoughts and feelings, not just what I can do for them. Someone who makes me want to be a better person, not just a more successful one." His words made Mira's heart ache with both joy and guilt. "And you think you found that?" He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious in the moonlight. "I think I might have. These past weeks with you have been different from anything I've experienced before. When we talk, I feel like myself again, not just the CEO or the heir to the cross fortune." Mira felt tears threatening. "Damien, I have to tell you something important." "What is it?" Before she could speak, her phone rang loudly in the quiet night air. The caller ID showed her mother's number, and Mira knew Patricia Santos would only call this late if something was wrong. "I'm sorry, I have to take this," she said, stepping away from Damien. "Mira, honey, I'm sorry to call so late," her mother's. A familiar voice came through the phone. "But I wanted to let you know that the gallery called. They want to feature 3 of your paintings in next month's Emerging Artists show. This could be your big break, sweetheart." Mira's heart leaped with excitement even as she realized her mother had just called her by her real name within Damien's hearing. She glanced over to see him watching her with a confused expression. "That's wonderful, Mom. Can we talk about this tomorrow? I'm not in a place where I can discuss it right now." "Of course, dear. I'm so proud of you. Your grandmother would be thrilled to know your art is finally getting the recognition it deserves." After hanging up, Mira turned to face Damien, knowing that the moment of truth had arrived whether she was ready for it or not. "Your mother called you, Mira," Damien said quietly. There was no point in trying to explain it away or continue the deception any longer. Mira took a deep breath and said, "My name is Mira Santos. I'm not Valerie Winters. I've been lying to you since the night we met." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. Damien's expression went through several changes, from confusion to realization to something that looked like hurt and disappointment. "You're not a model," he said finally. "No. I'm exactly what I told you I was, just not who I told you I was. I'm a painter. I work part-time at a flower shop, live in a tiny studio apartment with my cat. Valerie is my best friend, and she asked me to take her place at the charity gala because she had a last-minute modeling shoot. So everything you told me about your art, your passion for painting, your observations about life, that was all real?" "Every word. The only thing I lied about was my name and how I ended up at that gala." Damien turned away from her, gripping the porch railing. "Do you have any idea what it's like to constantly wonder if people are being genuine with you? Question every relationship, because so many people have ulterior motives. I know, and I'm sorry. I tried to tell you so many times, but I was scared you'd never want to see me again. So instead you decided to keep lying to me, to let me fall. For someone who doesn't even exist?" The pain in his voice broke Mira's heart. "She does exist. I exist. Everything between us has been real, except my name. It's your name, your identity, the basic foundation of who you are. How am I supposed to trust anything you've told me? Because you know me, Damien. You know my thoughts, my feelings, my dreams. You know how I see the world and what matters to me. That's who I really am." Damien was quiet for a long time, staring out at the lake. Finally, he said, "I need some time to think about this." "Of course, I understand. I'll drive you back to the city tomorrow morning." Mira nodded, fighting back tears. I'm truly sorry, Damien. I never meant for it to go this far, and I never meant to hurt you. She went inside and up to her room, where she spent the night staring out the window at the lake she had hoped to paint. Instead of the romantic weekend she had imagined, she faced the reality that she had probably lost the most meaningful connection she had ever experienced. The next morning dawned gray, and overcast, matching Mira's mood. She packed her bag quietly and met Damien in the lodge's lobby. The drive back to the city was mostly silent, with only brief exchanges about directions and traffic. When they reached her building, Damien helped her with her bag, but didn't make any move to follow her inside. "Will I see you again?" Mira asked, though she already knew the answer from his expression. "I don't know, Mira. I need time to figure out how I feel about all of this." She nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I understand. And Damien, everything. I felt everything we shared. That was all real. I hope someday you can believe that." As his car disappeared into traffic, Myra climbed the stairs to her apartment, feeling like her heart had been hollowed out. Tom appeared in his doorway as she reached her floor. "How was the weekend?" he asked, then stopped when he saw her face. "What happened?" "I told him the truth, and I lost him," Mira said simply. Tom pulled her into a comforting hug. "I'm sorry, Mira, but you did the right thing. And why does it feel so wrong?" Over the following days, Mira threw herself into preparing for the gallery show her mother had mentioned. She worked on 3 new paintings, pouring all her emotions into landscapes that seemed to capture the beauty and pain of her brief time with Damien. The lake from the lodge appeared in all of them, rendered in different lights and moods. A week after returning from the mountains, Mira received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Santos, her mother, arrived at her apartment with groceries and maternal concern. "You look like you haven't been eating," Patricia said, immediately beginning to make soup in Mira's tiny kitchen. "And don't try to tell me you're fine. I know my daughter." As they sat together sharing homemade soup and fresh bread, Mira told her mother everything about Damien, the deception, and the painful end to their relationship. "Oh, sweetheart," Patricia said, reaching across to squeeze Mira's hand. "Love is never easy, but it's especially hard when it starts with complications. I ruined everything, Mom. I should have told him the truth from the beginning." "Maybe, but you're human, and humans make mistakes when they're scared of losing something precious. The question now is what you're going to do about it." "What can I do? He doesn't trust me anymore, and I don't blame him. You can show him who you really are. Your art opening is next week. If he's half the man you've described, he'll want to see the real Mira Santos and her work." The night of the gallery opening arrived with autumn rain pattering against the windows of the downtown art space. Mira stood among her displayed paintings, wearing her best dress and trying to ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. The gallery was filling with art enthusiasts, critics, and supporters, but she kept glancing toward the entrance, hoping against hope to see a familiar tall figure. With gray eyes, "These are extraordinary, dear," Patricia Hoffman said, appearing beside her with a glass of wine. "I had no idea when we talked at the lodge that you were such a talented artist." "Well, I went up on we I know I read well. I want to row it all where I will row whatever and I'll can I've read a right upright Studying one of her lake paintings, Patricia. "How did you know about the show?" Damien told me. "He's been following your career more closely than you might think." Before Mira could ask what that meant, she heard a commotion near the gallery entrance. Through the crowd, she caught sight of Damien entering with Rebecca at his side. Her heart sank as she watched them approach her paintings together. "Excuse me," Mira said to Patricia, moving closer to where Damien stood, studying her largest canvas. The one depicting the lodge's lake at sunset. "It's beautiful," Rebecca was saying, though her tone suggested polite rather than genuine appreciation. "Very rustic and charming." Damien didn't respond to Rebecca's comment. Rebecca's attention was completely focused on the painting, and Myra could see something like recognition in his expression. "This is the view from the lodge," he said softly. "Yes," Mira said, stepping into their line of sight. "I painted it from memory. Rebecca looked between them with obvious irritation. Damien, we should go. The restaurant reservation is at 8. Chew. Go ahead, Rebecca. I'll catch up with you later. After Rebecca left with obvious displeasure, Damien and Mira stood alone in front of the painting. Around them, the gallery opening continued, but they seemed to exist in their own quiet bubble. You captured it perfectly, Damien said, studying the way she had rendered the golden light on the water and the mountains reflected in the lake's surface. The way it felt to be there, not just how it looked. That's what I try to do with all my paintings. Show the emotion of a place, not just its appearance. They moved through the gallery together, Damien studying each of her works with the same focused attention she remembered from their conversations. When they reached her newest painting, the portrait of a woman at a crossroads, he stopped for a long time. This one's different from the others, he observed. I painted it after I decided to tell you the truth. She's choosing between two paths, not knowing which one will lead to happiness. Which path did she choose? The honest one, even though it was scarier. Damien turned to look at her directly for the first time that evening. Mira, I owe you an apology. I've spent the past week thinking about what happened between us, and I realized something. You weren't the only one who was being dishonest. What do you mean? I let you believe that I was looking for something real and authentic. But the truth is, I was just as caught up in the fantasy as you were. I enjoyed having someone see me as just Damien, not the CEO or the heir to a fortune. But I never considered that you might have your own reasons for not being completely open about who you were. I should have told you sooner. Maybe, but I should have created a space where you felt safe to tell me. Instead, I put you in an impossible situation where you felt like you had to choose between honesty and losing me. They walked to a quieter corner of the gallery, where they could talk without being overheard by other guests. Where does this leave us? Mira asked. I'd like to start over, if you're willing. No more pretending to be someone else. No more wondering about motives. Just Mira Santos and Damien Cross, getting to know each other honestly. Mira felt tears of relief and joy welling up in her eyes. I'd like that very much. Good, because I have a confession to make. I've been thinking about commissioning a painting for my office, something that captures the feeling of hope and new beginnings. Do you know any talented artists who might be interested in the project? Mira laughed through her tears. I might know someone. As the gallery opening wound down around them, Mira and Damien found themselves back in front of the lake painting, planning their first real date as their authentic selves. Outside, the autumn rain had stopped, and city lights sparkled like stars reflected in water 6 months later. Mira stood in the same spot by the mountain lodge's porch railing where she had first tried to tell Damien the truth. This time she was holding a paintbrush instead of a wine glass, working on a canvas that captured the lake in spring light. Her easel was positioned to catch the morning sun, and tubes of paint were arranged on a small table beside her. It coming? Damien asked, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. Almost finished, Mira said, accepting the coffee gratefully. I think your grandfather would have loved seeing his favorite place painted like this. I think so too. He always said this lake had the power to show people who they really were. Myra smiled, thinking about how accurate that observation had proven to be. The lake had indeed revealed their true selves to each other, though the process had been more complicated than either of them had expected. Any regrets about how we started? Damien asked, settling into a chair beside her easel. Only that it took me so long to tell you the truth, but no regrets about where it led us. As Mira added the final touches to her painting, capturing the way morning light danced across the water, she reflected on how much her life had changed. Her art was now being shown in galleries across the city. Damien had become not just her partner, but her strongest supporter. And she had learned that love built on truth was infinitely stronger than any relationship built on pretense. Ready to head back to the city? Damien asked as she cleaned her brushes. Almost. Just one more minute to take it all in. They stood together on the porch, looking out over the lake that had brought them together and then nearly torn them apart before, ultimately showing them the way back to each other. In the distance, a loon called across the water, its voice carrying all the wild beauty and honest emotion that Mira had learned to paint in Damien, had learned to trust. The canvas beside them showed the lake in perfect morning light, but more. than that. It captured a moment of perfect understanding between two people who had finally learned to see each other clearly as they packed up her art supplies, prepared to leave the mountain retreat. Mira knew that this painting would always remind them that the most beautiful art, like the most meaningful love, comes from the courage to be completely and authentically yourself. The end.